What's up, guys? Justin here with the SketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp quick modeling video for you. So in this video, I'm going to do something a little different, and I needed a model to do a tutorial on my other channel, the Rendering Essentials, with some of Lumion's new features. What I was going to do is I figured I'd just go through on this channel and I'd just model that, and I'd try to talk a little bit as I go about what I'm doing. I don't do a lot of videos like this one just because it gets a little bit hard to explain exactly what I'm doing as I go, but we're going to give it a try anyway. So I am going to use a number of different extensions in this video, and I will note them as I go. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. All right, so it's back and forth on the way to do this, what the best way was in order to actually narrate this. So originally I filmed this video and I kind of talked as I went, and the video was over 40 minutes long, and I figured most of you probably didn't want to stick around for 40 minutes, so I thought what I'd do instead is just talk through it as I modeled and kind of speed everything up. So the first thing I did is I drew the profile of the front side of the building, and I used the push-pull tool in order to push-pull that out. And then I came in here and I modeled out the roof using the offset tool. So I just offset that out, and then I push-pulled the resulting face in order to give me my roof. So that gives me an initial roof material. And I actually came in here and I grouped my roof just so that I could turn that on and off, and messing with that in the future would be a little bit easier. So, and I wasn't really modeling for layout, but that's especially important if you model for layout. And so the other thing that was going on with this building is you can see how I'm drawing this kind of it's kind of an outcropping off to the side. So it's basically somewhere where the roof extends out. And if I'm being completely honest, I didn't quite draw this. I drew the roof slope a little bit long. This should have had a door on it, but in this case what I did is I just moved a line across, and I just used the perpendicular line function in order to basically extend my roof. So you can see how I'm just extending my roof profile this way, and really what I should have done is just offset that out. So when I offset that out, I could draw along this face, and I could just push-pull it in the exact same way that I push-pulled my roof on the rest of the building. So you can see how that allowed me to really quickly create this little roof piece. And the only problem I ran into is the little roof piece wasn't in my main group. So what I did is I used the outliner. I went off to the side and I actually moved that group inside the other one, and then I just right-clicked on it and I exploded it. So then that geometry was actually inside that group. And by the way, if you have any questions about anything I was doing, just leave a comment below. I'd be happy to try to answer them or break down any of this process. In this case, what I did for this building, because this is an image that I found online, and I'm basically modeling. I'm basically modeling to match that image, and so that image had a deck or a patio that kind of extends around the side of the building. And so what I did is I went ahead and I modeled that patio just using the push-pull tool and the So I just picked up the thickness, and then I push-pulled that around. And then I went in and I selected all of it, and I put that geometry in a group because I didn't necessarily want that all to merge either. So I try to keep my different kinds of geometry separated by groups whenever I can. And so once I'd kind of modeled that patio, which you can see how I had a little bit of trouble getting that done for some reason. I don't know why. It's pretty easy to select things and put them in a group. But the next thing I focused on was creating the glass on the front side of this building. And so basically what I did is I offset the face. So I drew a line down the center of this face, and then I did an offset so that I had a little bit of spacing between the different windows because they're on each side of the center line. And really what I should have done is I should have modeled this with the same thickness as the door. So I went in and I fixed that, but the intention was I was actually going to use this using the extension Lattice Maker to create my glass, and I will link to Lattice Maker in the notes down below. But basically what this does is it allows you to create glass panes really easily. It lets you set the offset and the material that's created, and you can see how what I was doing here is I just made a copy of that glass, and then I flipped it and I moved it back. So because everything was symmetrical, I didn't need to go in there and do it twice. I could just use what I'd already created. Then the other thing I did is I moved this on the other side of the house as well. So you'll see in a second what I did was, instead of modeling this whole face of the glass again, I just selected the whole face and I deleted out the material on the backside, and I just made a copy using the move tool on that backside. So you can see how now all I had to do was move this across as opposed to having to remodel it. So it's a huge time saver. So once I did that, I went in and I created the rest of the windows on this building. So I kind of used guidelines in order to set my height properly. So you can see how as I went, I just created the rough outline for my glass, and then I used Lattice Maker in order to create my windows. So I did the same thing on the back side, where I created a guide using the tape measure tool to the same height, and then I just drew a rectangle. I divided it into 3 panes, and then I used Lattice Maker in order to split that up. And so once I did that, I was pretty much done with windows. I made this one, I did an undo, and I made these a little bit taller. I wanted them to be taller on this backside, but then I needed to add a door. And I initially tried to use Lattice Maker, and I didn't really like the result that I got, so I actually used an extension from Valley Architects, which is Instant Door and Window, which I've done a tutorial on before as well. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just adding a white material to the model so that it shows up on this drop down list for my door so that I have the proper colors for all the trim. But then I just went in and I just added a door, and actually I initially made it a little bit too short, or maybe I've modeled my building too tall. I'm not really sure which. So I went back in and I adjusted this so it made a little bit bigger door, and I dropped that in there. So now I've got my basic shape roughed out. And what I decided to do is this has a railing around it on the patio. So what I did is I used the extension Instant Fence and Rail from Valley Architects in order to do that. So all I did in this case is I just drew lines where I wanted this to be. So you can see I selected those, I put them in a group, and then you can use that extension to select different kinds of railings to run along that edge that you've created. So you can see how I was looking for a cable rail, and I went in and I finally found one that I liked, and then I added that railing in here. So when I clicked Make Fence, it just adds that railing really quickly. And I pulled these edges out a little bit just so they were flush. There's probably a way to do that with that extension, but I'm not 100% clear on what that is. So now I went back in and I used the extension Instant Cladding, also from from Valley Architects, in order to add the board and batten siding on here. And one problem I had with it initially is because of the way Lattice Maker made the windows, I hadn't actually traced the outline of the windows on that face. You can see how when I hid that, those didn't show up. So all I did is I just went through and I just drew boxes across each one of the faces for my doors and windows, and I just deleted out that geometry. So it's a little extra work. There's probably another way to do it, but since there weren't a lot of windows, I went ahead and did this. You can see how when I did that and I reran this, my board and batten siding actually goes around my windows. And the other thing I needed to do was add a standing seam look, so I didn't want my roof to be flat. Well, I used the extension Instant Roof, also from Valley Architects, in order to do that. So you can see how adding those fins up there on the roof was really easy using that extension. So I went in and added those, and actually we'll talk about that in a second. So the other thing I did is I gave my walls some thickness. So I originally drew them as just single thickness walls inside my model. And what I should have done is I should have drawn them with some thickness, but a lot of the time I don't do that because it just makes it easier to work with extensions like Lattice Maker to create my glass. But you can see here what I do is I go in and I actually add a different material to my roofing. That's so when I export this to Lumion, I'm able to edit that roof material separately from the trim material on all my glass. And so then the other thing I did is I had to go in and I had to fix these walls from when I pulled them out. I didn't do that in copy mode, so you can see how there was kind of a gap on all of these. And so I had to go back in and fix that, but that was pretty easy. And then the last thing I did is I added in faces for my actual landscaping. So when I take this into Lumion, most of the terrain stuff that I do will be created using the terrain tools, but some of it needs to be done by materials, and so I need to draw those faces inside of SketchUp so that I have them so that I can edit them later. So you can see how I'm basically roughing out my flat grass area as well as just kind of the stone material around the edge of the building. So I just go in here and I just basically create a face and apply a grass material to that, just so I have something to work with when I go into Lumion. And I may do some fine adjustments a little bit later, but this will work pretty good for where I'm starting. So that's where I'm going to end this video. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Do you like this style of video? Is it just too much for you, or do you really like the level of detail that I get into? That'll kind of just help me decide if I'm going to make videos like this in the future. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. If you like what I'm doing in this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Every little bit helps, even if it's only $1 a month. So make sure you check out that link in the notes down below. But in any case, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.